Welcome to episode 43 of the Liz McMullen Show. My guest today is VK Powell. Welcome to the show, VK.
Thanks. It's nice to be here, Liz. Thanks for the invitation.
Woohoo! I know. I've been having like a Bold Strokes party lately because for a while I've had a lot of indie authors or small press authors and some Bold Strokes here and there. But because I met all of you at one table, when I was like, I was putting you into my schedule, and I was like, oh my God. And like Sandy Lowe and I are best friends now because I'm always contacting her for EPUB files and whatnot. Hi, Sandy. I'm having Karsten Tate on the show. Can you give me blah, 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 blah?
Isn't she great?
She's so super efficient. It's like she's everywhere.
I know. Love her.
Love her. Thumbs up. You're awesome. Actually, everybody at Bold Strokes is terribly awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So, first we're going to speak about Haunting Whispers.
Okay.
Which, what's interesting is since your novels all are somehow law and order based, what made you delve into using the paranormal light, because we're dealing with psychics and whatnot. We're not going to have any vampires, showing up.
Right.
No astral projection, no craziness. But what made you want to draw that into a contemporary story?
Well, I think maybe a couple of things, really. I had recently met a psychic, and I was just, I guess, really, really curious about what she does and how she does it. And we had hours-long conversations on the phone about how all that manifested for her from the time she was a very young child. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered this case that I had when I was a detective with the police department. And it was one of those cases that literally haunts you for the rest of your life. And you think, will I ever solve this crime? And so I thought, well, what if we had been desperate enough to actually elicit the services of a psychic? Because that's what you would have to say to a cop. Are you that desperate? Mm-hmm. And then they would probably balk at the idea anyway, because psychics and cops really don't mix. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yes, because for cops, you need facts and evidence and the tangible things that you can bring into the court of law.
Exactly.
And when you're dealing with the psychic, they have a different access to information that is not able to be recorded. You can't go in their head and see what they see, whether they be visions or a sense or whatnot. So it is the ultimate foil to anybody who wants proof,
Exactly. Yeah, and then you have to, as a police officer, you would have to find a way, which hopefully I did in the book, to incorporate the information that you get from this psychic individual into evidence that you could actually use in a court of law. You'd have to basically, as you do in any piece of evidence in law enforcement, you have to substantiate that in some way and prove that it is in fact valid, that it did in fact happen through another means other than just the psychic's idea.
Independent verification.
Exactly, independent verification.
Not like I read any mystery or detective novels on occasion. I used to. It's so funny. I think I've done this weird Luddite thing where when I was... I'd say about 10 years ago, I used to spend a lot of my time watching true crime and also watching the different shows like Law and Order, all of its incarnations, including SVU or SUV, depending on who you're teasing. Mariska Hargitay, yay! Yeah. And now I prefer, for the most part, all my entertainment is reading. Mm. And I find it utterly satisfying. But I still have those little roots, of the past. And I don't know if you've read Jessie Chandler's work, but she has a character in there, Edie, who's a woman. I think she's in her 60s, And she's a huge Law and Order fan, and so she's always incorporating the things that she learned from watching these different shows into the capers that they get involved in. With lots of hyperbole and whatnot.
Yes.
Speaking of interesting choices, were you teasing by making it Ray Butler, kind of like Rhett Butler?
I didn't even think about that.
Are you kidding?
I am not kidding. That never crossed my mind.
Oh my God, that was what hit me the first time I saw the name.
It never crossed my mind. Thank you, Liz, for that visual. No, it never did. I'm like, oh.
I was just like, I was like, oh my God, she's messing with us.
But now I won't be able to read this character without thinking Rhett Butler. Oh, that's embarrassing, isn't it?
It's fun. These are little fun discoveries, you know. I discover things that oftentimes authors don't realize that they do. For example, I loved to tease Carson Tate about in more than I know, right? In more than one book, referring to afternoon delight. And I am familiar with that term. And the first time it actually was emblazoned in my consciousness was from the film Good Will Hunting. Where the one character was messing with a psychotherapist, and he started talking the lyrics to the song, but it took a moment for the therapist to realize they were being exactly. He's like talking, and then he starts singing it a bit. I was just like, oh my God, that's fucking hilarious. So it's a very unusual reference modern wise. And I said, you know, and a lot of your lawyers have French braids. What's going on with that? That's very 80s, 90s. So there's little sniglets. So I caught you doing Rhett Butler and you didn't even realize.
I didn't even realize it. That's exactly right.
Ray Butler. But you did have fun, I believe, with Detective Brown and Detective Green.
The colors?
Yes.
I love that. I just had to do it. I don't know. Devil made me do it, I guess. I don't know. Here's what I thought, Liz. I thought, I'm so freaking tired of trying to figure out unique and different names for these people. There comes a time in your manuscript where you go, oh my God, not another character. Please, not another character. So I thought, okay, fine. You're going to be green, you're going to be brown. So get used to it. I might as well make it fun.
Yeah, totally. That's totally fun. And I imagine it must be, you know, one of the things that I find unusual, interesting, and sometimes absurd is the way that many lesbian fiction authors try to reimagine names by spelling them differently or giving them a twist. You know, unusual spellings for names and whatnot. Well, it's not a man, but it's a butch. And so we have to butchify this particular name and just come up with the most unusual spellings or, you know, plays on it. But nothing's as fun as Ray Butler.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Can you let my listeners get an idea of the plot or the story of Haunting Whispers?
Yes. Well, what actually happens is Ray Butler, not Rhett, inherits a series of assault cases, and they were passed on to her from a senior detective when he retired. And, you know, she's going to investigate these cases, you know, and they're kidding her that, oh, you don't have a chance. You're a young, new detective. Forget about it. You'll never solve these cases. And in the meantime, the other character, Audrey Everhart, who is the mayor's publicist, has been assaulted. And this happens kind of early in the story. And Ray is assigned her case as well. And so she goes in to investigate Audrey Everhart's assault. And Audrey is not at all interested in getting her story told to a detective because she has some things to hide. And, you know, not the least of which is the fact that she's a psychic. So she doesn't want to talk to Ray. She doesn't want her to delve into her past. And, so these two kind of clash over a lot of things. And yeah, I can't tell you the rest of it.
Yeah, well, we don't want to spoil it. We want you to read it. We want you to read it. And what I thought was interesting is how she did not want her case to be pursued, and not because she was ashamed of what happened, but partially because she wanted to figure it out on her own, because that's the best approach. Let's find this man who hurt me, and we'll see what's going on there. But she wanted to basically, get out of my playground. I don't want anybody in my playground. I'm having a really private space. Don't you see the screen and the curtain? Mm-hmm. But I thought it was interesting that she's like, don't you have better crimes to solve?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and part of the reason she doesn't want Ray delving into this is because she's psychic, and the other connection is, that she thinks that if she solves her assault case, that some things in her past will make sense again, and she'll move on. So there you go.
There's also this it's not a device, but it's something that happens often when you have a psychic character, is that they have vision in some areas and blindness in others. Mm-hmm. And yes. She has, Audrey has this huge blind spot when it comes to people who are doing things to her.
Right. Right.
And so she can't, even though usually she can get a feel for what's going on around her or people's intent, she has empathic abilities. Mm-hmm. She can't see who assaulted her when she was, doing a walkabout in a community center that needed to be redone, and she didn't sense danger until it was too late, and then she gets jolted by a taser, I believe.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then you did a really great description of the shutdown. The being stricken, and then the physiological effect of that happening.
Would make one think that I've been tased, wouldn't it?
Have you been tased?
It's part of the training. What can I tell you?
Oh God, it makes me want to sign up right now.
Yeah, that and being tear gassed, those sort of things. You just have to experience it so you'll know what to expect. But yes, she does a shutdown in certain areas of her life, and she also has difficulty being able to read people that she loves and people that are close to her. Mm-hmm. That also is a blind spot of hers, So as she and Ray get closer, she becomes less and less able to read her intentions and her thoughts and her feelings and things. So, she has a couple of blocks, and the stories about how she overcomes that, what happens.
What's interesting is not only does she have this aspect of her being psychic and a medium of sorts, I guess, is that she's not proud of it.
Right.
She's not proud of it. She doesn't embrace it, but it's something, it's a form of stimuli that she can't block out. So she tries her best to barricade herself in certain circumstances. And one of the things that she was avoiding doing with Ray was touching her, mm-hmm. because if she touched her, she would see. And then at another point in the book, somebody didn't want her to see what had happened, so she didn't allow Audrey to touch her.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why won't you let me touch you? Why can't I hug you? Why aren't you telling me what's going on?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Turnabout is fair play. But they're trying to protect her. One of the more gruesome things that happened, you have a prologue where this guy, was he a mercenary?
He was a soldier at one time.
He was a soldier. So this for Black Ops.
Yes,
and
exactly.
he was supposed to rescue the wife of a high-ranking Iraqi official, and he failed. We don't know how, and he's going to miss his I don't know if they call it a drop point, extraction point.
Extraction, yeah.
I was trying to think of the opposite. What's the opposite word from drop? Extract. He knows he's going to miss it, but he's been trying his best, using all those survival techniques to try and slip away. Mm-hmm. And when he's basically making a run for it, an explosion goes off, mm-hmm. and he's injured. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, because we get to know him as well, Arya, I think is how to pronounce his name. But you never know how disfigured he is.
Right. Right.
Because he's stalking Audrey. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, how is he hiding in plain sight? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, is he like does he, dress himself in homeless garb? Is that how he kind of gets around? How is he gaining entry to her home?
So you kept guessing, is that right?
Exactly. And I always guessed wrong, and I didn't figure it out. And it's a spoiler to the answer to it. But it doesn't, there's nothing wrong with teasing the listeners.
That's right. Teasing's good. We all like teasing.
So I'm teasing you in that I honestly thought he was more disfigured from the explosion. I thought that it would be very difficult for him to be stealthy and not be caught. And I was like, how the hell is he managing this? I mean, he's got to have a limp of some, because his lower half of his body felt like it was on fire. Probably literally in some ways. So I'm like, how the heck is he getting around and nobody's seeing him? He can't be that super awesome, and he's not like he's human. He's not paranormal.
And even prosthetics aren't that great.
I know. I was like, how the hell is he so close to her? And for some reason, as I said, she has blocks. For some reason, she can't read him. She can sense his presence, but she can't read him. And I was just like, is he a superhero or a supervillain?
He's a supervillain.
He's a supervillain. Is he a supervillain? How does he get away with that? That actually was very surprising.
Actually, as villains go, he is probably the worst villain I've ever written in a book. I mean, he's the baddest bad guy I've ever written, I think.
Yeah, you know what it reminded me of? John Sanford. Have you ever read his stuff?
No, I don't think so.
He's got this series, and each book, the title has the word prey in it. And he's a detective in the Twin Cities. And so you get to see things at times from the perspective of the suspect.
Okay.
And you get an insight to the psychology, and it's very visceral when you get a sense for things and how evil somebody is, and the thought processes that they go through, and you have those parallel stories where you see the detective Davenport is trying to discover him, and then the parallel track of what he's going along, and they're all serial killers, so I have to say, you wrote quite the villain. He was
Yes, he was.
That's Lizzie using her words.
Yes, it's very good words.
Liz, use your words.
Some people have asked me, do I write a lot of blood and gore and, all that stuff in my books? And I'm like, well, usually not. I usually try to keep the blood and gore to a minimum. I try not to kill people unless they really deserve it. But I think if I had to pick a book that's probably more that way, it would be Haunting Whispers. Yeah.
But one of the other things, and this is something early writers should think about, is you can let your audience, your reader, know what the baddie is up to without like a profuse use of extreme actual violence, as opposed to stuff even though it's written, happens off camera.
Right.
So he is a baddie, and he does some really awful things, and there are some revolting aspects that get into the story, but it's not a direct hit. Right. Yes. So that's hard to do, but sometimes when you leave it up to the imagination of a reader, it becomes more of a baddie and more horrifying or obscene or strange if you let somebody use their imagination. Yeah, and I prefer that, because after 30 years in law enforcement, I've seen enough of it. I don't need to write that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore, really. So, I try to gloss over a little, I guess. So In your little bio that you have at the end of your books, you talk about law enforcement is what you used to pay the bills, and writing was your pleasure. When did you start getting into writing?
Well, I think I've always been a writer. I kept journals from the time I was very young. I love the physical process of writing. I'm still one of these throwbacks who likes to do handwritten thank you cards and invitations and things like that, you know. So I've always kind of been a writer. But I think I actually wrote my first story in 1990 when I was a student at the Southern Police Institute in Louisville, Kentucky. There were a whole classroom of guys and me. So I didn't have any play friends, you know, any girls, any women that I could really feel comfortable with, and we could go out and do stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I hung out with the guys all I wanted to, and then I go back to my room at night, and this is when you had to drag your big PC and your big tower and all that stuff with you. It was like hauling a baby refrigerator. So, you know, I just started writing these stories about these women that I wanted to read about, and you know, I guess you'd say I made up my friends. My imaginary friends came to life.
Well, I like imaginary friends. I get unnaturally attached to my favorite characters in books.
Oh, I do too. I love it. It's wonderful. And that was my first story, but I didn't actually do anything with it until after I retired. So.
No, I'm with you, and it's so funny. There's this series that Rod has. It's a Justice series, and I'll admit I didn't finish a book because Michael in one book had a traumatic brain injury because she was a car ran into her because they were trying to kill her partner and didn't expect her to be the one. So she kind of got hit. And she was not the intended target, and she had gone through so much with that. I'm like, you can't. The next, and so she got over it, and her job is, using her mind. She is she's an ideas person in her company, and I was just like, you can't hurt her again.
That's just too wrong.
So I was just like, I can't finish reading this because I could see the bad guys are casing the house, where everybody's kind of using as a base. Right. And I'm like, you can't do something to Michael. I can't read this.
Yeah, we do get attached to our characters.
Oh, God, yes. But that's actually, that's a sign of a job well done when people can identify with and get attached to them. And please don't do anything bad to my characters.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You write standalones. Have you ever thought about writing a series?
Interesting. You should ask that question, Liz. I have thought about it. I thought about it 2 books ago, and I thought, nah, I'm not ready. And then I have been thinking about it recently. I'm just in the process now of finishing book number 7. Mm-hmm. So usually about halfway through the book, these new characters start jumping up in the background going, me next, me. Mm-hmm. So I've been thinking about this series idea, kind of kicking it around in my brain a little bit, but I'm not yet convinced that it's what I want to do, because if I do it the way I'm thinking of it, it'll be written in first person, which I've never tried before.
First person is hard. It
is hard, absolutely. So I'm not sure if I want to try 2 different things at once, a series and a first person POV. So
no rubbing the tummy and tapping the head at the same time?
No. No, don't try that. So I'm still toying with the idea, maybe someday. Because, I have people all the time going, oh, please, do at least a sequel to Protect and Serve. Oh, do a sequel to Exit Wounds, So, but anyway, so we'll see.
And I'm glad that you mentioned it from, a writing craft standpoint. One of the reasons why first person is difficult, 2. Number 1, how do you avoid using too many sentences that start with the word
I, yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Which is a hobgoblin. Like, how do you describe things around you? Also, if you are writing something from a first person, that means that the only internal dialogue that you're going to be experiencing is your own, like the first person, and the only thing that you're going to know about other characters is through the eyes of the viewpoint character.
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's very difficult to keep it going, and you have to figure out how through dialogue or observation what somebody's thinking. That's not an easy task.
Exactly, and it takes, to me, first person is obviously a lot more personal because of those reasons that you just stated. Mm-hmm. Because you do have to go deeper in yourself, and you do only get to give your perspective, and you have to keep that interesting, and you have to keep it going because that's all you've got. So. I think you're right. It's extremely difficult, and I don't know if I want to tackle that just yet.
Well, there are baby steps, and I call them short stories.
I've done some of those.
Yeah, sometimes, because I have a friend of mine, Alex Triss, I had her on the show twice. I had her for bedtime stories and for an interview. And when we did the interview, because I interviewed her in the cocktail hour first, she was one of my initial interviews when I was guest hosting there. Mm-hmm. And we talked about her books there, but during the episode on the Liz McMullen show, we talked about her short stories. And she likes to write her short stories by the first person.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do too. Mm-hmm.
So, whenever, for those of you who haven't tried something new or different, sometimes the short story format is a great way to get your feet wet as opposed to a novel or novella, which can be thousands and thousands of words. So it's a good try, but it's definitely a challenge. Will you tell us which book you're pondering turning it into a series, or will that just turn into a firestorm of emails in your direction?
Well, it's not actually one of the books that I've already written. I'm thinking about a complete new series if I do it.
Oh, fantastic. So then they won't torture you specifically.
Right.
You said something possibly about doing a series, and I was wondering, is that going to happen? Because I feel bad for authors, because as a reader, I'm voracious. And, when I had the time before I was doing the Liz McMullen show, if I liked one book an author had written, I bought all of them and then read all of them. And then once you finish reading all of them, then you're like, author...
That's right.
It's like, can you hop to? I know, I devoured your book in 1 to 3 days.
Right.
And it only takes you 3 months to a year or so. But can you speed up that process, please?
Exactly. Well, we love to hear that, and we hate to hear that. It's like you just said. It takes us months and months to write it, and takes you a day or two to read it. But I tell my friend Carson Tate, she's like, you're just a slacker. You only write one a year. And I'm like, you're a classic overachiever. I have to put Carson and Rad in the same boat. The Rad blows my mind. How are you a publisher and an editor and still manage to write 2 or 3 books a year? Yes.
Of several ongoing series? I had her on the show, and I was like, how do you do it? How do you manage to keep all that stuff in your head? She's like, I'm very efficient.
Discipline and efficiency.
And she's so gracious, so it's not being cocky or anything, but I was just like, you're magical. How the fuck do you do that? Mere mortals, how?
Yeah. She's amazing, all right.
Mm-hmm. Miss Rad. So we are going to transition to talking about your latest novel, Exit Wounds. Okay. And you provided me with a blog called Truth Becomes Fiction, and it seems like there are a lot of different strands going on. Something that actually happened and how it turned into a novel. Is it almost 3 decades later?
Yes, it is.
Why now?
Well, because I wasn't writing stories then.
No, I'm not torturing you. I'm just curious, because, I'm just curious as to why this particular story, can you talk about what actually happened it was in 1980?
1985.
1985?
Yes,
and
1985.
So tell us what happened in 1985 and how it turned into something that you wanted to write in the last year or so.
Okay. Well, as I said in the blog, it was an actual incident that happened while I was on duty one day. And, well, actually wasn't on duty. I'd gone to a doctor's appointment, and one of our guys was filling in for me. And there had been an investigation in Greensboro and in a neighboring town, Winston-Salem, of this gentleman and his girlfriend, who were actually first cousins. And they had fallen in love and decided that they were going to get married, and to hell with what their families thought. And their families were both very prominent families in the area. And they had actually killed a couple of other people. And the SBI and Greensboro police and some of Winston police had gotten together, and that day in June they were going to go and pick him up at their apartment out in West Greensboro. Warrant in hand, they go to the apartment complex, and just as they get there, he and his girlfriend and 2 children are coming out of the apartment. So he opens fire on the officers who are in the parking lot, shoots my counterpart who's filling in for me that day, and takes the police on a Simpson-esque chase, all through Greensboro and out into the county. And then they get on this little road out in the county where there's nothing and nobody, and it looks like just a long train of police cars following this Bronco.
Mm-hmm.
So we have made the decision that now we need to stop this vehicle. It's away from a populated area, and he's just going to be dangerous, and he's armed, and we know that. So we have him semi-contained in this area. So we get ready to stop him, and as we do, the vehicle explodes. It just blows up. And she was killed instantly. He was thrown out of the vehicle because the explosive device was under her seat. He was thrown out of the vehicle and died at the scene from injuries. And the 2 children in the back had been shot prior to the explosion going off. So the story has just kind of, I told in the blog about how one of our local reporters, Jerry Bledsoe, actually did a series of articles in the local paper about this event, about the background of the families and how this all came about, and parlayed that into a New York Times best-selling book called Bitter Blood. So I had thought about this story for years and years and years and never really thought about writing about it at all. And then, these things can trigger a story idea in your mind. It can be something you see on television or something you read about in the paper, or a friend can say something. This particular idea for me came when I was we have a minor league baseball, what do you call it, stadium?
Mm-hmm. Ballpark.
Yeah, that's it.
Woohoo!
I'm not a sports person, so
oh my God, neither am I.
I think there should be half times in baseball. Somebody was horrified at that. I'm
like, baseball, it just goes on and on and on.
Okay, we better stop this before we insult the baseball fans in the audience.
What the thing is?
But anyway, I'm at this baseball stadium. And park. I'm at the baseball park, and it's after the game, and they're having a fireworks show, and it's a beautiful fireworks display every night after the home games. And I'm sitting there, and this incident comes to my mind, and I thought, the writer's number one question: what if this wasn't a vehicle that exploded, but a residence? And what if the people weren't crazy cousins who'd fallen in love and were going to kill everybody and take the family wealth? But what if it was the partner of one of the main characters? So that's how the story idea came about.
What? I know, I'm so articulate. I just make sounds. One of the things that I find fascinating is when you read something and get a closer look, on the surface it seemed that Lone is a serial non-monogamist. You know, she doesn't seem to get into her relationships, and it you know, for whatever reason, she's never able to keep her girls happy, you know, from an emotional standpoint. And so it seemed like, from the internal dialogue that between the two characters as the first few chapters to go, I'm like, Abby has it bad, you know, for her. But, you know, I don't think Lone has the same feelings towards her, because that was my first indication, you know, in the first chapter. I was like, oh dear, she's having that, somebody's going to have the talk, and we're going to have to talk about the talk. And so the feeling that I had at first was that that's how Lone felt about her. Then as the story started to unfold, this is before the explosion, you get the closer look, and maybe Lone is not as detached as you may think. And then the explosion happens, and she is not just not detached, she becomes obsessed because she doesn't know if Abby is dead or not. Because last time she saw her, you know, in a window, she was in that house, and the house explodes, and even in the short term, Lone can't handle the thought of her being dead, so she is trying to get back into the house so that she can rescue her, and ends up injuring her hands on hot metal, and she still doesn't want to give up until she passes out, I believe.
Yeah. That's right.
So that's what that was a big surprise for me. I didn't think that she would be that attached. And then months after the incident, she's like a dog with a bone, and nobody's told her that Abby's dead, so she may be alive. And so that was a surprise for me.
Good. Good. I'm glad. Because it's really interesting. This story started off completely different, because I'd written the first chapter and I was like all the way through everything, and I thought, okay, this is good. I started it out a little bit differently than it starts in the finished version. Sent it to my editor, wonderful Dr. Shelley Thrasher, whom I love, and she says, no. I'm like, what, Shelley? She's like, no. You have to redo this whole first chapter. I'm just not buying this at all. I'm like, okay. So I took it back, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do here? Because I tried something different. Obviously, it didn't work for my editor, so it probably wouldn't work for the audience either. So I redid it, and I sent it back to her, and she sent me this message like shortly thereafter and said, I just love it when authors listen to me. So apparently it worked.
Yay!
I still wanted to keep that element of surprise. I tried to establish the relationship between Lone and Abby early on, so that then when this horrific event happened, you know, there would be the impetus for her to follow through with this investigation. So, you know, hopefully it worked. Yeah,
it's like opening a door to what may be going on between Abby and Lone, and then it not actually closing. Something happens. It's almost like having an open case file. It's like something happens that, you know, abruptly ends whatever, you know, what's been going on. And goodness. And Abby does not want to leave Lone hanging, but she's stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Would it be spoiling things to say that she's not your usual informant?
Yeah, she's not your usual informant. She's got a lot more on the ball. She's had some unique training that kind of helps her in this situation. But, you know, she doesn't understand why she can't stay and just, you know, tell everybody the truth and let life go on as it should. But she's made certain promises, and so, you know, she's kind of stuck with her choice.
Yeah, and you would normally, when you're introduced to an informant, there is something that is inextricably tying them to having to be an informant. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not something that they can, you know, tap dance away from or stop doing there. That you have to have the dirt on an informant to force them to continue to do something, especially putting themselves in danger. And Lone's looking at Abby and doesn't quite understand. She doesn't seem like an informant, and her behavior doesn't seem on point, and Lone doesn't treat her as a traditional informant either. In the first chapter, Abby's like, you treat me like an equal and try to help me make this assignment work and help me keep my sanity and whatnot. And that's not what the ATF agent in charge is doing for her. So it's an unusual relationship from the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is. And, the fact that Abby is a is working off drug charges, you kind of go, oh, God, not really. That's awful. But, as you said, every informant has to have a hook. Every informant has to have something that the officer can hold over his or her head to get what they need out of them. So for Abby, this is, drug charges.
Exactly. So she wants to tell Lone, what happened, and that what it appears to have happened hadn't. But it's a very sticky situation, and what surprises me is how much Lone unravels, because for her, when she's trying to pursue what happened, why is this case immediately closed? This doesn't make any sense. We don't get a full accounting as to what's happened. Every door is slamming in her face, and she's not only a cop, but she's from a family of cops. Mm-hmm. And so her world is comprised of, a history of law and order, and trusting, the system, and working with, coloring inside the lines, so to speak. And when it ceases when closing the case and not knowing exactly what happened to Abby, when the cops are not talking to her or saying that she's done something wrong, or everything that was ordered is disordered, she's just like, I don't want to even be a part of this.
Right. That's exactly right. You read that very well. That's exactly right, because that was what I was trying to get across. Her life has always been very ordered, and she went into the police because her father did, and she likes that structure. She likes that, coloring in the lines, as you said. And when all this goes haywire, and it seems that her fellows and everybody, even her brother, has turned against her, then she doesn't care anymore. It's like, well, all of this to hell, I'm going to find out on my own. So that's what she does.
She goes rogue, but not in a Mel Gibson rogue way. Right.
She goes a little bit rogue, and that works for her, apparently. So, I always seem to I was noticing today, I was talking to a friend about my next work, and I said, for some reason I always put my cops in trouble. Why are they always in trouble? But anyway.
A non-spoiler funny tick that Lone has is when she's trying not to lose her temper, or is trying to cope in a situation that is chaotic, she starts reciting historical facts in her head.
Yes, she does. That was an old thing that her dad got her into when they were children, and she just kind of liked it. It was something that bonded her with her father, and it kind of carried over in some trauma in her young adult life, and she just kind of carried it on to adulthood, and it seemed to work for her because it took her out of the moment and gave her a minute to calm down and, regain her control and do what she needed to do. So it kind of just carried through.
I really dig the street character, Vi.
Oh, great. Here we go. Several people have said, Vi needs her own story.
She's just fantastical and magical in her abilities to find intel and
she is.
Be a little squirrely, and I love her because she just messes with Lone. Is that like a Lone?
Yeah. That says a lot. Explains a lot.
It's a little punk.
Street urchin. That's what she is.
And as street urchins go, she's very resourceful. And one of the things that surprised me, though, was that Lone wasn't very good at surveillance. Mm-hmm. She was very obvious. I thought she was not necessarily the super cop, but maybe because she was too clean cut to understand what she needed to do in order to be kind of stealthy and not seen.
Yes, and just because you're a good cop doesn't mean you're good at surveillance. Because, it's just like interrogators. Not all detectives are good interrogators. Not all police officers make good detectives. Mm-hmm. Not all police officers can work undercover and bias narcotics. So just because she was a good street cop didn't mean she was good at surveillance. So, yeah, exactly. She kind of stuck out because she used the normal techniques of lurking in the corners and the alleys and across the streets and stuff like that. And she was just too clean cut. She stuck out. So,
with her platinum blonde hair.
Mm-hmm.
Vi's like, it glows.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You can't blend in. It glows. And you're a scarecrow. Try eating.
Yeah, really. I really loved writing her character, and I don't think she would be upset when I tell this, because it was kind of loosely based on another Bold Strokes author, Ashley Bartlett. Because we hang out a lot when we're at events and everything, and I said, I'm just going to put you in a character in a book. I've just got to. So, I'd say, look, Ash, is this like something 20-ish people would do? I'm like, so I'll be, and I'm like, okay, speak English. I had great fun with that, and a friend of mine asked me the other day, well, would you please write a book just about Vi? She needs a girlfriend. I said, I don't think I can do that. I mean, for a secondary character, yes, but I don't think I can channel a 20-year-old for an entire book.
I always wonder about that when, one thing that I don't understand is why so many books are written where the main character is very close to 30 or slightly more. It's like, why is it always the 30-somethings that get to be the main POV character for all these books? Like, why is that the magic number?
Who knows?
I don't know. And I had Lacey Gardner do a reading for Lizzie's bedtime stories, and she's a very colorful writer. And she said that she was at a reading, and she asked people what they would like to see. Mm-hmm. And she said they wanted people who were not in their 30s or even 40s. They wanted older women to be like the main characters and whatnot. So she wrote this great story about an octogenarian who decides to run away from home because her wife won't let her have real bacon.
Okay.
It's like, they've been together for a long time, and, her wife's looking out for her, to help her not, sorry, we have a cricket in my room that wants to be a part of the interview.
To say, I'm looking all around my place going, where is that darn cricket?
The cricket is...
It's yours.
It's my cricket. Apparently...
Okay,
as like a sidebar, apparently the crickets have decided our home is awesome this year because this has never been a problem. We've had this home for over 20 years. But yeah, there's a cricket in the room. I don't know where he or she is.
Okay, I don't mind sharing.
But yeah, so I was just like, yeah, we're going to talk about the South. And that's why I have crickets. I always bring some kind of, Anyway, so...
The only thing that would be more Southern than a cricket is cicadas, but you only get those every 7 years, so there you go.
Do you know what, though? When I lived in Hoboken, we had them in the backyard, and Hoboken's like a city. It's on the same water as the Hudson. It's on the Hudson across from Manhattan. And yeah, they're a loud rhythmic sound that, like, it's almost like light cackling.
Yeah, it's very distinctive. If you've ever heard it, you won't ever forget it.
Oh my God, this cricket is going to drive my partner nuts, but that's neither here nor there. So, I was thinking about Abby after she cheated death, which is, obvious. That's not the huge spoiler, because you figure out that she survives the accident, though nobody is supposed to know because she's still on the case. And as it goes for, I guess, organized crime, oh, you're going to make it to the next level. You've just went above your pay grade. It's really exciting. Now you're even more useful.
Yeah, really.
But it was like almost worse than prison. Like she couldn't even, do anything on her own. Like she was in the compound, and anywhere she went, there were bodyguards or other folks watching what she's doing. But what I thought was extra creepy was when she was driving the quote unquote furniture across from Miami, up north, was that she stopped to see her family for 2 hours, and she got a call from Carl saying, "You've been stationary for 2 hours. Are you okay?"
Yeah, that was creepy, wasn't it?
And she's just like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "Well, I have somebody in helicopters and whatnot, and, they can be there, if you just stay there for a little longer." And she's like, "I thought we kind of talked," like she's trying to set boundaries with the criminal.
Yeah, really.
"I thought we talked about this. I need to have space. I need to do my own thing."
Yeah. She was working it, I'm telling you.
Oh, my Lord. You have a lot of super characters, and one of the other two awesome characters is Thomasina and her partner, Eve Winters.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thomasina is apparently like the nurturing type, and can make some wicked good food, and is just very easy to be around. And then her partner is this kind of no inner filter, tell it like it is, brutal, cut the shit person. It's just like.
Yes, I love these two characters. They're actually based on a couple of friends I have here. Yeah. Because one who is a no bullshit kind of character kept saying, "When are you going to write me in a book? When are you going to write me in a book?" I said, "Okay, fine. I'll put you in a book. Tell me what you want to be called, and I'll put you in there." And so she gave me the name she wanted to use, and I said, "Now, don't be upset when you see yourself in this book." Because you're going to be pretty much like you are. So I loved writing them. It was great. And they're very much like those characters, I can just tell you. One of them is, as you said, the nurturing, caring, loving, homemaking kind of baking and cooking and making her own desserts and entertaining and all that. And the other's like, "Oh, who gives a fat rat's ass?" Exactly. You look at them and go, "How did you end up together?" And they've been together for almost 30 years. So.
They're awesome. I love them. I love them because I could see, when Lone was trying to hatch her harebrained idea of kind of falling off the radar and whatnot, and bringing it to her, and she's just like, "Can we talk you out of this, because this sounds like a terrible idea."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a little further down the line, she gives Abby a little taste of something when she shows up on her doorstep. So yeah, she didn't make it easy on Abby, and didn't immediately give Abby contact information. Basically told her, it's not like she almost killed herself trying to save you, or has been in hell for the last 3 months because she didn't know what happened to you, and hasn't been like, "Is she okay?" Well, she's alive. So, yeah, she's not.
Yeah, she's alive, if that's what you mean.
But yeah, so.
Yeah, that was good. And I was just saying that's exactly what this person, real person, would do. It's like, really? So, yeah, I enjoyed those two characters. I enjoyed writing them a great deal.
Oh, they're fantastic. And I love it because one of the beauties of somebody who has no filter but has a very incisive ability to assess a situation, and she basically crystallized everything into a paragraph, a few sentences to basically let Abby have it. And Abby, part of her is horrified by what she's hearing, and like she wants to burst out into tears. But the one thing that kind of gets into her skin is the fact that Eve thinks Lone is in love with her. Mm-hmm. So she's having like a little happy dance, in her head, in the book. Oh, this is not good.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. That is a point at which Abby's like, "Oh, great, wonderful, fantastic. Oh, shit." Because when she left, she really didn't know how Lone felt about her. They didn't get to have, that kind of conversation that she really wanted to have with her. And then when she left, she thought, well, it's for the best that I don't let her know what's happened to me, and I'll tell her about it as soon as I can. And, she had no idea that all this stuff had happened to Lone, and that her feelings were going to come out, and that she was going to be in this desperate place or anything like that. And so while she's happy that Eve thinks Lone is in love with her, she's like, oh no, if that's true, then I have really messed up. So, yeah, it's a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of the role that she's in as an informant. It's almost like a form of being in jail because you're tied to it and you can't really walk away from it. But instead of a jail sentence where, it will run out, she is perpetually tied to this case, and she thinks that she's looking out for Lone by not contacting her because she's got no idea how the explosion happened and whether being in contact with her would put Lone's life in danger. So she thought that also after the incident, after the explosion, she had no idea how long she was going to be away.
Right.
Or that she wouldn't have any time or space to be able to contact her or anything like that. And then she finds herself back in the belly of the beast in a worse position where she is the manager of one of the skin joints that the family owns.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, she has no idea how this all ties together. She has no idea who she can trust and who she can't trust. And she comes back to Greensboro, kind of against her will because she's stuck in this assignment, being this informant, and she really doesn't want to do it, and she really does want to do it because she wants to see Lone, but she's afraid that she's going to lead the bad guys to her. And, she has questions about how this explosion happened, and she doesn't understand it, and she can't find any evidence of this gun running case, and, it just seems like an endless tunnel that she's going down, and there's no way out of it. So she really doesn't know what to do, but, plod merrily along, I guess. She doesn't think she can trust her ATF contact, and, so, what's a girl to do?
Well, it's tough when you don't know who to trust, and the way it's set up in your book is not, I'm sure it's not anything, if there's corruption at some level or at different levels, you don't know who you can go to, where you can run to that is a safe place. And there's no firm ground for her to walk upon. And they're all kind of lost. Lone wants to figure out what happened. She desperately wanted to know if Abby was still alive and whatnot, and she hated being on the outside. And, I feel bad for Lone because not only was she on the outside, but her world, people's perception of her as a cop changed very, very rapidly. Imagine being like this law and order, this very clean-cut, rule following with the exception of her libido with Abby that you learned in the beginning. What it must feel like to have your entire identity put on its end. Yes, it was. It was, that's part of what threw her into the tailspin. Not only what happened to Abby, but this disconnection from this family, in essence, that she had lived with and known about her entire life. She grew up her father telling her, the police will always be there for you. It's like a family, thin blue line, blah, blah, blah. She never conceived of the fact that this would ever break down for her, ever. She'd always followed the rules, always done what she, knew was right. And, she always thought that she could depend on him when she needed help. And that didn't turn out to be the case. So that, in addition to the fact that she had no idea what happened to Abby, just set her on her ear and sent her off down this path of, I'll just be a rogue then. I'll figure out what I need to myself, and, the hell with all of you. So there, I'm not playing with your toys anymore. That's right. That was a hard road for her because she'd never tried that, and she didn't really know how to function outside the parameters of law enforcement. And that's where Vi came along and really kind of helped her see, that she needed help. I'll show you how to live on the street. I'll show you. I loved the makeover session.
Oh, yes. Wasn't that fun? That was lots of fun. I enjoyed that.
Oh, that makeover session. Like, oh, what do you want to do? It's like, I'm not going to, you can cut my hair, but, we're not going to color it. And, oh, man.
We're not coloring anything. We're not piercing anything. We're not tatting anything. So just forget about it. Well, what can I do? And Vi's like, oh, you're just ridiculous. So, but yeah, that was fun.
That was a blast. So, folks.
And then, of course, she had to test her look. Once she had the makeover, she had to test her look. And that's, things got a little dicey. But
yeah, she went into the skin club and was getting frisky with one of the dancers who wasn't exactly fighting her. That's right.
Trying to get a little lap dance action going there, and you can't really touch the dancers in a lap dance. It's against the law. The bouncers are trying to tell her, no, you can't do that. She's like, go away.
I was this close to climaxing, you bastard.
That's right. I'm so close.
So close and denied. And on that note, you need to buy both of the books, if not all of her books, because they're wonderful. What do you have coming down the pipe for your fans?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm in the very late stages of my 7th book, which is called About Face. Mm-hmm. And it's a story of course, a cop and a forensic artist. And it's kind of very interesting. It's a little more... I write romantic suspense, and this is a little more on the romance side than suspense. Exit Wounds was totally suspense with a little bit of romance. Mm-hmm. But this one is a lot of romance and a little bit of suspense. So it's a little bit of a change. I needed a little break after Exit Wounds.
Yeah.
But, I'm excited about this one. It's gone very quickly, and like I said, I'm pretty close to the end. So I'm excited about that one. That'll come out next year.
So are you a planner or a pantster?
I am a planner. Planner, with a little caveat. I was telling a friend of mine today, before I started this book that I'm working on now, I had a 7-page spreadsheet. Laid my characters out, laid every scene out, laid out, what's the purpose of this scene, blah, 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 blah. Whose viewpoint are we in? What day is it? What chapter is it? And the whole thing. I said, I made it through the first page and a half, and then the characters took off on their own. So, I plan. I have an outline. I know what I need to get into the story. Mm-hmm. But as far as following it, that doesn't always work. So,
but it has to be comforting to have a foundation to return to. Because if you're riding by the seat of your pants, if your muse decides to take off on you, you're sitting on the ground waiting for stuff to happen.
That's exactly right. And you're right. That's what it is. It's a foundation, a base to come back to. When you've wandered off on a tangent, you go, okay, did I get that in? Where was I when she went off on this tangent? And 9 times out of 10 for me, when the characters take off on a tangent, it's something that developed organically out of the story and made a hell of a lot more sense than what I'd laid out in an outline before I knew these characters very well. So, it works great. It's a process that we have worked on together.
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how do stories, as you said, you're at the ballpark and you saw the fireworks go off. Are all of your novels sparked that way? By something, in your life, or do things percolate for you for a while, or like how do the stories come to you?
Well, usually it's an incident, or a lot of the ones that I've written so far have been in some way related to something that happened to me in my police career. Mm-hmm. My first book, To Protect and Serve, is probably the most personal of my books. It more closely parallels a certain time and situation in my own life than anything else. Mm-hmm. And the others, have been sparked by cases that have happened through my career. And they don't always come to me just like, oh, I think I'll write a story about that case. Mm-hmm. I get these characters, as I said, about halfway through my current work in progress, and they'll start raising their hands and say, oh, write a story about this.
Me next.
Yes, me next.
So it's not that orderly putting quarters on the pool table saying I want to play the next round.
No, not that easy. And I have a little, what I call an idea box. Mm-hmm. And when these ideas come to me in the middle of a book, I just jot them down and I say, okay, I'll think about you later on. I can't think about you right now. Mm-hmm. So I jot down what's come to mind in my idea box. And then when I finish the story I'm working on, I'll go back and say, okay, how strongly do I feel about this story and these characters? And that's how I pick what's next.
So are you talking about the point when you send it off to an editor or the point when you've polished it and are, like it's going to go to press?
You mean when I finish and start thinking about another one?
Yeah. When do you start working on the next one?
Oh, in the middle when the characters start coming up. I usually jot down those ideas as they come up, mm-hmm. Just so I have something to refer back to in case they go to sleep in the next half of the book. But usually I jot down the ideas first, and then when I finish the rough draft mm-hmm. And send it off to my beta readers, then I'm pretty comfortable I can start working on something else.
Cool. This has been a very wonderful, exciting, amusing, and unfortunately we've lost our cricket.
Aw, Liz.
It's too quiet. It's not in here. Apparently, it took great offense, took umbrage to my action of switching to another room to record the episode because, I'm the first person to say that I have attention deficit disorder. And the cricket was it was too much cricketing.
Well, thank you, Liz. I've really enjoyed this. It wasn't as painful as I thought it was going to be.
I'm touched.
If you can make me, an introvert, feel comfortable enough to read and talk while being recorded, you're doing a great job. So thank you for that.
Well, golly, aren't you sweet?
True.
Oh, so thank you for coming on the show.
You are so welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Liz. I've enjoyed it, really.